Thank you, guys. Paris, that was very sweet.
Welcome, everybody. This is our third annual event of the DGA's LGBTQ+ committee. And how many DGA members do we have here? How many Writer Guilds members do we have here? And how many SAG members do we have here? And that is why we created this. Because what we felt we wanted was to create a sense of family within the industry, with our communities. And for that to go across all unions. And which is why for our third event, I couldn't think of anyone better to invite than Greg. Because I feel at the heart of Greg's work, which I spent the last week watching quite a bit of, is family. That power comes from family, whether it's chosen or with the one you were born in. And it's our interconnectedness, whether you're a mortal or a superhero, that gives us our strength. And in a time like right now, we need each other more than ever. And one of the things that I love about Greg's work is his optimism and his hope, and how that is not just superpower, it's resilience. So with that, I'd like to welcome Greg to our third annual event.
Thanks for having me. Thank you, guys. Thanks for coming out.
Okay, so speaking of family,
Yes.
what was yours like?
Growing up,
Yeah.
very tight-knit. I grew up in Rye, New York, mostly, and my parents were from that town. They had grown up in that town. My cousins all lived there. My Italian family lived there. There's a lot of family in that regard. And it was, I grew up in the 80s in this small town as it was sort of changing, I think, and becoming kind of, a Gap was opening up, Blockbuster was opening up, the chains were coming in. There was parts of it that were idyllic. Obviously I was a closeted gay kid at a time where there wasn't, the internet or LGBT groups in schools. So there was definitely a sense of isolation, I think. But I had a very close relationship with both my parents, and there was a lot of it that I loved. I fell in love with theater. I fell in love with, sadly, I was the town puppeteer. And so I was doing puppet shows for kids' birthday parties and things like that from the time I think my mom got cards made up and stuck them around town. And I started doing that at like 13, 14. So that was my first form of storytelling. And then I wanted to be Jim Henson, and I actually got to meet him because they shot some of Muppets Takes Manhattan at Rye Playland. And I brought all my puppets. And Frank Oz was there, and Jim Henson stopped by, and they saw this kid standing there with all of his puppets, and they came over and they took my puppets and they started using them and giving them voices. And that was a very inspiring moment. I was probably a little too old to be standing there with a group of puppets, but and then theater. I participated in theater, and that brought me to Northwestern, which is sort of like what opened up a lot of doors for me.
Were you ambitious as a kid?
I mean, I loved storytelling. So I was ambitious in that regard. Like I always wanted to be a part of whatever. We had the first cable channel in town, and I participated in producing things for that. And then, obviously producing some actual theater and directing some theater. I always wanted to be a part of the event. And that brought me a lot of peace. And I was one of those kids, and this probably remained true for a large part of my life. Like I didn't really have a close group of friends. I really floated amongst a lot of people, but I always felt when I was participating in a show or things like that I was part of a group. So that was my real sense of connection, I think, to people.
So when you went to college in Northwestern, you studied theater first, right?
I did. I studied theater, yeah.
And was that still kind of trying to find that connection and that family in a place where you belonged?
Yeah, I didn't know that I was going to be a writer. I thought I'd be an actor because I had done that the most as a kid. And then I auditioned for the way they did auditions was you went in. It's why I have so much tremendous respect to this day for actors being able to be vulnerable in front of a large group of people or on set and just be in the moment. I went in and did you did one audition for like 6 plays at once. And then they put all the callbacks, on the board. And I went down to the first set of callbacks, and I thought, okay, well, I'm not called back for that, but I'll be called back for this. And I slowly went down the list, and I wasn't on any list. And I thought to myself, all right, I have to there's a lot of competition, and there's some people here who are really, truly gifted at this, and that may not be my thing. And so I sort of spent the next year or two figuring out, like, well, what's the best way for me to still be involved in all this if my skill set isn't, what I thought it was. And the more I wrote, the more I fell in love with writing. And really it was when I first started to feel like, okay, this is I think this is the right dream to have. So that was sort of how I backed into it, though.
What was the first thing you wrote?
The first thing I wrote was a play that first plays are like first pancakes, like they are awful. So like, I don't even want to say the title, actually, to be honest.
Oh, come on, do it.
Oh my God, this is embarrassing. I mean, it might as well be a Barry Manilow song. It was called September Rain. But the great thing about Northwestern was you do these plays for playwriting class, and they would bus in from Skokie all these, older people who had nothing but time, and they would sit there and they'd give you notes. They'd watch the reading of your play and they'd give you notes on so the first set of notes I was getting was from like a 78-year-old woman from Skokie, and they were like tough. And so I learned how to take notes, really, I think, was like, and how to like really, I think probably amongst everything I work on, the thing I'm the most cognizant of at every phase is the audience. I think that's, more than anything. And whether it was rooted in that time or what, I don't know, but that was where I was first aware that like, oh wow, this is like, you really have to be aware of your audience at all times.
Do you remember any of those notes?
No, but they were blunt. I just remember how it felt after the notes. And then I won my first playwriting award for that play. And then I wrote a few more, and one of them, my senior year, I had a show, and someone came and saw it and said, I'd like to send your play to a friend of mine. She works at this agency called CA something. And I was like, great, that sounds great. And a few weeks later, I got a call from an agent at CAA who said, I read your play and you should be a writer, And so then I thought, okay, I have to make my way to California. And then after graduation, I waited for about 6 months. I worked in a theater in Chicago for a little bit. And then I finally kind of got the money and the courage together to move out here. And that play that they had read, I was trying to get a production of it going out here. And it was based on a book that I had never gotten the rights to. And the author had since passed, and his son lived in Los Angeles and had the rights. So I had him come see a reading of it, and he took me for like my first sushi dinner afterwards, and he's like, I'm not giving you these rights, sorry. And so I was sort of stranded in Los Angeles, and I had taken some screenwriting classes in college, but there weren't many back then. There were no screenwriting books. It wasn't the cottage industry that it became over the next decade. You were still scared in the early 90s to tell your parents you wanted to work in the movie and television business. It wasn't like, considered a reliable source of income.
So when did you tell them?
I told them that I wanted to do this, and they were, amongst the many wonderful things about my parents, or my good fortune, was that they were supportive. I mean, I had to pay for myself in every regard, but they were emotionally supportive. And my mom would send me $20 every now and then. And so I got a job at CBS as a script typist for Young and the Restless and Bold and the Beautiful. And we would type those scripts at night. I guess writers have to work to a deadline. If they had just paused production for a week, they could have caught up, but they wrote them the night before they shot them. And at the time, the writers all lived around the country, and they would fax their pages in. And every writer did a different storyline. So you would accrue those things, gather them together, and type the one script. And I cheated on the typing test to get the job. And so
how do you cheat on a typing test?
The woman that ran the place, I don't know if anybody went to our gang ever worked at our gang anyway, they were my temp agency. She wanted to set me up with her niece. And so she said, I want to set you up with my niece, and I'm going to leave you in here with this typing test. And when I come back, it better be 100 words a minute. And I was like, great. And so I got the job falsely under false pretenses. But I really needed the money. And she and the people there that typed the scripts with me realized like, oh, you are not good at this. And so I begged them. I said, give me 1 week, and I promise I'll type a lot faster at the end of the week than I type now. And they did, and I kept the job, and I did that for 6 or 8 months, and it was double time because it was over, double time because it was after hours. And I would finish at like 2:00 in the morning, and then I would go to Jerry's Deli, and I'd get a plate of those onion ring things, and eat those and write scripts. And that was sort of like my film school. And the Writers Guild had stacks of old scripts, and I would go, and I'm in Hollywood. I'd like to learn how to. I thought I was going to write movies. I still didn't have any plans to work in television at this point, even though I was my nighttime job. I got a job also at the Sherman Oaks Galleria as a phone operator, and I tutored the SAT, and I was horrible at the math portion, so they wouldn't let me tutor that half. I could only tutor the English portion of the SAT, and I did that for 2-3 years.
Wait, who called the Sherman Oaks Galleria?
There was a business center next to the Sherman Oaks that was affiliated with the Sherman Oaks Galleria, and one of the people I answered the phone's office was Israel Bond's office. Shalom. That was one.
Was that okay? What was the worst job you had before you started writing professionally?
Well, I mean, these were all. I have to say, I enjoyed all these jobs. Like I really felt like at the time, I didn't know. Again, I didn't know if I was gonna be successful in any regard. The week before I sold my first script, my car got booted, and I hadn't registered my car in the state. So I had to pay the back pay for the registration. I had to pay the boot, which was not cheap. And I had to pay the tickets that had accrued at the point where I got the boot. So I was like low on everything. And I lived in this place on Beechwood Canyon that was like a garage or someone's house, basically. And the location that I lived, when you're driving home at night, it was the best spot to take your picture in front of the Hollywood sign. So I'd get home from these jobs, and there would be a tour bus there filled with whatever country, and they would all ask me to take their picture for like a half hour in front of the Hollywood sign. So I would stand there and just take these people's pictures and think to myself, I'm so far from Hollywood right now, But I had a great group of friends. I was coming out, we talked a little bit about that. So I was also like starting to live as myself for the first time, and I was definitely, making bonds I hadn't made before and enjoying that part. And I was writing. I was still writing. I used to joke with my friends. I was like, oh yeah, I have this deal set up with my futon, and I have this other writing deal set up with my so-and-so. And I would make up in my head, like, reasons to like who I had set my scripts up with. But I was all those years, they ended up preparing me that when I did get my first job, it wasn't my last job. Like I was really ready. I knew my voice. I knew what circumstances I could write well under or not write well under. I knew that I really wanted to keep doing it. The attrition of the fact that like, I think it was just about surviving, that time. And so I was having a lot of fun with it.
Okay, a little caveat. We met at that time.
We did.
Both of us in our early 20s. And through a group of queer and gay writers, producers, actors, all with a dream. And it was kind of, for me, what was really moving about that was in this big city, it gave me a place where I felt like I fit in.
Yeah.
And having other people beside who wanted to do and chasing after these crazy dreams made me feel like it might actually be possible. Like, did you think back then, 25 years later, we'd be on the DGA stage?
I mean, I thought maybe you would be. I just didn't honestly, I didn't want to be a director. Didn't you go to film school too?
Yeah.
Just that. Yeah. I remember that. I remember like vividly, and we haven't even discussed that part, but I remember thinking like so many people like, oh, that person actually is legitimate. They went to film school or they did this, or they really want to do this. I knew I wanted to, that I really was happiest in my day writing, and I knew that, I enjoyed sitting down, and at the end of however many months, I'd have like a piece of material that proved I worked at the computer every day. But I did not think, no, I would never have thought I would have been on the DGA stage like this. So.
But I was doing script coverage for studios back then, which is a way to kind of like learn about writing and to learn about 3-act structure, et cetera. And I remember you got a TV job.
Right. I did.
He got a job, a show that you might have heard of called Dawson's Creek.
Yes.
How did that happen?
Well, I wrote this. So I wrote 9 scripts when I was out here, and the first 8 I would, hand out to my friends, do that thing where, I thought it was all about like how cool the cover was or something, and I'd get like a special cover, and they never respond. Like people would like go out to dinner with you repeatedly after it and like just not bring it up. And finally on my like 9th script was the script that became Broken Hearts Club. And there was no blacklist back then, but had there been, it was that kind of, people were, it was a script that several people at the time who had a very big careers told me, don't write about being gay. No one's ever going to read that. No one's going to buy it. And yet it was just sort of poured out of me. And I did have some friends around me who were very encouraging of me writing it. And that script got passed around and it got in the hands of Kevin Williamson, due to my good friend Julie Pleck, who I'd gone to college with at Northwestern, who was always very inspiring to me as a writer. And she was working with Kevin at the time. He had just finished Scream. And he invited me in and he said, do you have any movie ideas? And I said, yeah, I have this other movie idea. And I pitched him a movie idea that we went around and we sold. And that was the first thing I sold, was a pitch, not a script. And we sold it to every studio, and there was a bidding war and blah, blah, blah. And then I had to write that. I had the pressure of having to now write the thing that I've sold for the first time. So I was in the midst of writing that, and he said, I just finished this pilot. I want you to watch it. And he stuck in a VHS tape of Dawson's Creek. And I remember thinking like, wow, those kids talk funny. And, this is cool, but I don't think I want to work in TV. I've worked so hard to get to this moment in film. And he's like, I'd love you to write on the show. We just finished the first season. It's not out yet. The second season's about to start. We could really use a writer like you. He was so kind and supportive. And I was like, Kevin, I think movies are my thing. I just, I hear you get rewritten a lot in TV, and I love writing, and I don't want to get rewritten. And, he's like, well, that's a weird request, but if you want, I'll just give you notes, I went home that night and I told my parents that I had this other opportunity mentioned to me. And my father was like, if you do not call him back right now and tell him you're taking this, I'm going to call him myself. And no shit. And so I called him the next morning and I was like, when do I start? And he's like, we start in the room in 2 weeks. And I went into the writer's room of that show. And I didn't talk much in the writer's room the first year on that show. And if I did talk, the night before I would call Julie and I would run by her what I was going to say. I was so scared to talk. We had some very intimidating writers who have gone into great acclaim in that room, including people like Mike White. And so I was very nervous, but I loved it. And I thought, oh, wow, this is a lot like theater. It's dialogue driven. It's writer driven. The writers are there for the inception of the story all the way to the end, to the time the audience sees it. They're a part of every creative decision that gets made along the way. And you're building a universe of stories and connected characters, and you're isolated when you want to be, but you're together with a group of people when you want to be. And I felt like I remember any person I was super close with that at that time, I called that week and said, I finally found the thing that I'm supposed to find. And so by the end of that year, because of the nature of my silly request with Kevin of, hey, don't rewrite me, just give me notes, I had written on 7 or 8 of the scripts. And in the interim, the other thing that happened that brings us back to directing for the first time was that script, Broken Hearts, which was called 8x10s at the time, landed on the desk of a producer named Mickey Liddell. And Mickey took me to dinner and said, I want to make this movie. We're not going to have a lot of money, but I want to make it. And but I want you to direct it. And I said, I've never directed anything before in my life. I did one play in college, and he said, no, I think I've just been talking to you about it, and it's so visual on the page, and I really think you're supposed to do it. And so how
did that feel when he said that?
I think a large part of my early career was turning things down, actually, out of fear, and so I was like, that's great, but can we meet with some other directors? And we met with a bunch of other directors, and he said, they're all great, but I really want you to do it. And so when you want to make this movie, you come back to me and you tell me, and I'll go get the financing. And so
you didn't ask me.
I didn't know you were available. And so I went about my way and just worked on Dawson's. I think that was also part of it. I was finally working regularly. I was trying to finish that movie I mentioned for Kevin. The end of the year came and and my lawyer called me up and she said, I think you should leave in your contract for next year. You should ask for some time off to do this movie. I think they'd give it to you right now. Every other writer left the show at the end of that year, including Kevin. So I was the only writer returning from season 2 to season 3 of Dawson's. And so season 3 started, and we had problems. Like the tone was off. Kevin wasn't there. It was a little crazy. And then I went off to direct Broken Hearts Club. It was about a 15-day shoot. And I think I had 2 weeks to prep or 3 weeks to prep and 2 weeks to shoot, something like that. And it was in September, October of that year. And I came back to the show and they had fired the showrunners. And the network president and the studio president brought me to lunch. And they said, we think you're supposed to run the show. I swear to God, and again, you guys know what I'm going to say. I said, no. And I was like, thank you, but no thank you. I went home. I did not call my parents. I knew that they would tell me I had to take the job. I thought everybody who takes that job gets fired. I think they fired 3 people in that job. I was like, I don't want it. My goal was just to not get fired, and to sit in my office and this time my lawyer and my agent called me together and they're like, did you say no at this lunch with the president of the WB? And I said, well, I didn't say, I don't want to get fired. And they said, you just got yourself fired if you don't say yes. So you should call them and say, so I called them and I said, okay, I'll do this, but I've never done this before and I'm really going to need your help. And I can't promise you the show's going to get much better. And, and the only thing I would like is if I do this, there's a gay character that we brought out this year on the show. And, no person's been allowed to kiss another character no gay character's ever been allowed to kiss another character romantically on a network show. And I would like this character to do that at the end of the year where the other characters do that. And if you guys say yes to that, then I'll run the show.
We have the clips. Should I show them?
Sure. All right.
Okay, who else's heart just broke for Jack?
I have not watched that since then, and I forgot it was unrequited. And I forgot about Brad. I forgot about all of it.
Jack still remembers.
I know.
Okay, so that was easy to get on the air, right?
No, it was not, actually. So in the 11th hour, they said, we're not going to do it. And I was like, we had a deal. And I walked out of my office and the whole thing, and I quit. And they called the next day and they said, we're sorry. We promised you and we're gonna do it, but there's gonna be restrictions. And they wanted the camera across the street. They wanted the whole thing. They didn't want a close up, blah, 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 blah. I couldn't be there actually when it was shot. I do remember being on the phone. I mean, cell phones were just around, being on the cell phone with the writer who was monitoring that day and being like, you make sure you get a close up. And anyway, so it became a thing, then it aired and of course no one cared. But one of the ways that I had to prove the point in the 11th hour when they were debating all that was I brought in a cut. This was the show was airing at 8:00 now, I think. And I brought in a cut of clips of other things that had aired at 8:00 on their network, mostly violence. And it was a clip reel of just violence and violence and violence and violence. And then I said, and so you're not going to let us just air a kiss. And so I had some supporters there, the right ones, and they came around.
And that was the first same-sex kiss between 2 men on network television. For those of you who remember, do you remember Melrose Place?
Well, that was a big part of it. I mean, we used to watch Melrose Place in my fraternity. That's a whole other panel. Anyway, so, but I remember the kiss, like the cutaway, which I think also happened in the 11th hour. But yeah, I remember how upsetting and frustrating that was. And I watched all those shows as a kid. Dynasty, I was grateful that they had these gay characters though, in that regard. That was brave for their time. Or 30-something having men in bed together, there were precursors that enabled me to want to put a punctuation mark in the end of the sentence,
So at 27, one of the youngest showrunners in history, he got the first same-sex male kiss on television, all the while directing his first feature film that he wrote called The Broken Hearts Club. How many of you have seen it? And that premiered at Sundance.
Yes. So I went off in October, finished shooting, and we got a call at Sundance. I was just telling someone the story, but we got a call from Sundance saying we have an availability not for competition for a premiere slot in January, and you got to finish your movie by January. So it was in the Dawson's Creek Post offices that I would bounce between cutting the episodes and going to cutting that scene and cutting the film. And we made it. We made it to January and we premiered but then the movie didn't come out till, I think September of that year.
What do you think made you decide that for your first film, well, first off, it's about a group of gay friends.
It was.
Was it based on the people we know?
It was. I mean, emotionally, especially. I mean, certainly some specifics, but I think it was, I'd always loved Diner as a film. And, I think there were a lot of us in the last 20, 30 years who were sort of saying, well, where's our so-and-so? Where's our this? Where's our that? And for me, I wanted to capture a moment in time emotionally of like just what it felt like to be for me, not for everyone certainly, but for me, my experience of West Hollywood at that moment. And the found family, which really was the wonderful gift of coming out, was this like getting on the other side of that, feeling a sense of connection and family with friends that I had never felt before. And so that was the origin of it. And, and then I worked on the script. One of the people that encouraged me to work on the script was a friend of mine that I had developed because I had loved his script so much as an assistant. I had called him and we started a friendship, was Ryan Murphy. And so, and then
Ryan Murphy.
Yes. He encouraged me to quit my job. He did. And he's like, he had just made his first check. And he's like, I need a new research assistant on my next job. And you can write your script and I can do this. And so I quit my job and I was his research assistant for a couple months. And while I was researching during the day, and then I was working on this script, and we would sit at Rita Flora on La Brea, and where he was decamped most nights, and he'd give me notes on the script. And Julie Pleck also gave me notes on the script. They're both credited in the film. It's special thanks, and I think Julie's a co-producer on it as well. And so there was definitely like, and he was on a separate friend group that I was kind of in, and then our group of friends as well.
Can I show them a clip from it?
Sure.
Hit it.
So, the great John Mahoney. So he got the movie greenlit. He said yes. It was the first time in my life I had written a part with someone in mind. I didn't know. I think since he's passed, it's been made public that he was gay, and maybe he was to his friends, but certainly wasn't out publicly. I just had watched him for so many years and loved him in Say Anything and Frasier and everything, and I had written it with him in mind. And someone sent him the script, and I wrote a letter, and he met me for lunch, and he said, "I'll do it." And once he said, "I'll do it," we got the money, and the movie was off to the races. And that was the first scene I shot with him. And at the end of it, he told me, I didn't want to say this before we shot the scene this way, but I've never shot a scene in pieces like this, like it was there were a lot of pieces to the thing, and I didn't know any better. I just did it that way because of the space we were in. And I appreciated him not telling me that until after the scene was shot, but he had so much faith in me. It was a gift. He is a gift.
I mean, that movie is a gift. One of the things I love about it, I watched it recently. First off, it still holds up. I love the emotion of being 20 and trying to figure out your identity and finding your chosen family first, and how difficult it is to find who you are in the gay scene and fall in love. But just that line, you made gay life ordinary. Because at that time, from what I remember, so many gay films were about tragedy, were about trauma. And this, as you said, was kind of like a diner, an American Graffiti, but a queer one for our times. And I feel like you've helped normalize LGBTQ culture in television and film just by presenting us for who we are.
Well, I appreciate that. Obviously, I've had a lot of help and family and friends and coworkers along the way, I think encouraging me to, and the biggest luck of the draw was in my first couple of jobs. I was very supported to tell my truth. And I actually, ironically, after not having success trying to be something I wasn't, and having more success and making an income doing what I loved, being something that I was, that it was sort of felt like the right path to stay on. And then, in subsequent years, just being able to create an environment like that for other people who have so many iterations of lives to live. I think that's been incredibly rewarding. And you get the great reward of many years later, like, being a part of just, putting out stories in the world that you'd like to see. Sometimes the world lines up with that. Sometimes it doesn't, but when it does, it's nice.
And I remember thinking after this, you didn't go chasing after features like the rest of us did. You created Everwood, Jack and Bobby. You ran Brothers and Sisters. All three character-driven, acclaimed drama shows about families.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, like, I feel like a lot of times in your career, you either saw what was coming ahead instinctually, that television ultimately would become the dominant force in telling these kind of stories, or was this completely luck of the draw or just where your heart took you?
It was more the latter. I mean, I had some people tell me early on, hey, don't get lost in TV, But I have to be honest, it probably similar to what I mentioned this morning about never really feeling aligned with a particular friend group. I've always felt even in our business, in the sense of like, I work with some tremendous producers, and I call them like producers. And then I work with some writers who are just like writers, and that's all they want to do. And that's all. And certainly the directors that I've worked with through the years, I've always admired them so much. And I've never really truly felt as naturally inclined or as gifted as they are at that. When I direct something, it's usually something that I feel very called to do, that I feel like, oh, I'm probably the only person that should do this because I know so many other people who do a better job. And so show running was probably the thing that combined all the things the most for me, in the sense of like, that was just where I felt the most like, oh, I get to use all my parts, and I can touch down in all these different things that are exciting to me. And, I can go from a story room to a story room with 12 different characters or 10 different characters or 5 different characters, and remember what every character's up to and be a part of charting that whole thing and ushering that emotional experience for the audience to the end. I think that's where I feel the most content. And so it wasn't, I think I would just sort of, and show running's not dissimilar to directing in that regard. That's where they're very aligned. You really are the arbiter of the emotional experience, or the conductor for the audience. And I really enjoyed doing what I was doing, and still do. And but when I have to spend a singular amount of time doing any one of those things, whether it's writing a script or directing or producing or, any of the other things, I have such tremendous respect for the individuals that, have to do it all the time, that one thing, and do it so well.
I'm curious, what do you think makes a great TV director? And what are some of the things you wish some television directors knew?
Well, I'd probably start with, for me, I think the hardest, I mean, again, I'm not just saying this because I'm here. Of all the jobs, because now I've done them, a lot of them, TV directing and pilot directing, but episodic directing it's the hardest. I think it's harder than, for me, physically, it's harder. It's you have to bounce into a place where if you're episodic directing, you have to bounce into a place where you are, it's a different Thanksgiving dinner is held every week by all these same people who are at it except for you. And you have to take command of that, and you have to marshal that story, and you have to see something in a new way that maybe there's however many episodes, no one's seen it that way before. And you have to make people feel immediately comfortable. And pilot directing versus a movie, where in a film, the bigger the budget, the more people job it is to just present you with decisions to make all day. But when you're pilot directing, you have to create whole worlds in such a minute amount of time and with such limited funds. And so I have to say, for me, that's where I'm probably the most intimidated by, in terms of like when I see people directors that can do that. And so I would start with just like, I would say I wouldn't start with what I think they should know, because I do think, one of the great advantages is probably, doing what I do. A lot of times directors, there's the old Mike Nichols quote about It's like sex, you never get to see how the other guy does it, and like in show running post, you do. I get to learn from all these different directors along the way. And I get to learn from them in prep, how they prep it. I get to learn from how they, direct it. And then I get to learn in post how they see something new. So I would say, it would probably the most often challenge we have with new directors is just in post to have more faith that we're not going to just like, that we're not trying to cut their thing to shreds or, that like to have more faith that we've spent a lot of time in the edit bay and we're trying to do what's right for the show. And so I would say it's probably just more, if I watch them ever hold on to anything too tight, that tends to be where that happens, but it's a small piece of advice compared to the amount of gratitude I have for them, because I think they're the great unsung heroes of television.
Do you hear that, television directors?
I don't know. That's true.
But you did get hired to write a feature called The Green Lantern.
I did.
Okay. Tell me if this is
the Green Lantern that was in the theaters is not the Green Lantern I wrote. I just want to say that. But it did lead to DC. I mean, it led to me working at DC. Yeah. That was like trying to make a lemonade out of lemons or whatever.
Because I feel, again, you kind of predicted the industry before it happened in all of a sudden going from these kind of family-oriented dramas to doing Arrow.
Right. So I loved comic books as a kid. And again, I'd always wanted to get in a comic book movie. And I pitched on some ones that went on to be very big comic book movies, like even the first ones. And we got the opportunity to write Green Lantern. I wrote it with two other television writers now and big feature writers that I've worked with in the past. We wrote a script we were really proud of. For a minute, I was going to direct it, and they were like, your last film was Broken Hearts Club. We're not going to give you a $150 million movie to direct. And I was okay with that, obviously. And so they had another director come in. He hired another writer. And I went off and directed another film for Warner Brothers, which is how I met my producing partner, Sarah Schechter. And so, which I can get to if we want to talk about that. And so that was a wonderful thing that came out of it. But the other thing that came out of it was I got to know DC really well. And so my deal was at ABC at the time, and I went back to Warner Brothers, and Warner Brothers and DC said, hey, we want to do more work and we want more superheroes on TV. Who would you do? And I said, well, I would do Arrow, but I just had such a bad experience. You'd really have to let us do the show that we want to make. And they said, cool. We pitched it to them and we got it on the air, and sort of the other shows grew out of that. But it was very much, I think, as a kid growing up reading comic books, I didn't want to I didn't want the first film I was a part of to like get me banned from Comic-Con, and so it was at the time, it was a miserable experience because, it was sort of, and I remember going to see the first cut of the film and thinking like, oh my gosh, my name's going to be all over this thing. And thinking like, okay, well, that's it. I'll never get to work on another comic book, anything ever again. And, and so it turned around.
Is Sarah here?
I don't know. Oh, there she is.
Everybody, Sarah Schechter. How long have you two been producing partners?
11 years. I did a film called Life as We Know It at the time in lieu of doing Green Lantern. She was my executive, and she ended up being the best producer on the project as well. And so I said to her at the end, would you like to make TV and movies together? I think you're more of a producer. You love being in these meetings and talking about story, and you help there's nothing that you can't get done when you want to get something done. And I was casting her as a producer, and she felt like a producer, and how blessed I was. And then, of course, by 2 years after that, she joined. We had something like 10, 12 shows in production.
I think together you guys had, at one time, was it 18 shows in production, which is the world's record for the most amount of shows on television as a writer, creator, producer, or showrunner. And in their spare time, they had a little hobby called making feature films. How the hell did you guys do this? Do you sleep?
Yeah. we wouldn't replicate that period per se. There was a burgeoning happening with television in general, you know, and obviously we have a lot of great showrunners and directors and writers that we work with. And, you know, Warner Brothers is just the premier place to make TV. And so we had a lot of help. I'd say, you know, we're a great balance in that she loves nighttime. I like the mornings. Like, so we balance things that way, but we also have different tapes, but we also have tastes that are like overlap. And, you know, you build, I think with anything you do in the business, you start to sort of build your Supreme Court of, you know, not like the Supreme Court we have right now, but your actual, like back when it used to be a great Supreme Court, you know, of folks that you trust and you know that if you like this script or you like this piece of casting or you like, you learn to trust your instincts more because you know, you've been through things together.
Because a lot of people here are looking for producing partners or starting to work with producing partners. Do you two feel like you share a brain at this point? And what would you say makes, like, how did you two know that you were a beautiful fit?
Time. I mean, you know, you don't know. I mean, you don't know. I think we do share some pieces of a brain and we are wildly different in other great ways. But we're not afraid to be honest with each other and have conflict too and work things out and, you know, I think challenge each other. And I think to your initial point, resilience. I mean, 90% of everything, of all these stories I think I could tell you tonight are going to be about just trying to stay optimistic in the face of a lot of rejection, a lot of bad news, a lot of bad days. And you can't always be that for yourself. And so I think if you really cherish the people you work with, as I think we do, you know, that gets you through those times. And then you blink and you're at a happy time again. But you go through a lot of times, you know, the business is musical chairs and there's a lot of years that like you don't get the chair. And I think the perception would be, you know, you'd read a number like that, 18, like, oh, it must be you guys, you know, I think very often the perception is like, oh, things must be easy or that we've had this blessed. And there is a lot of blessings and we are very grateful. But I would say we've had, and maybe Sarah doesn't agree, but I would say we've had more hard or challenging days and we've had like days where we celebrate. And what makes it able to get through those things is each other and the people that some of whom are also here tonight who we've been lucky enough to work with.
You guys found family.
We did.
And you... What? You caught me. So again, you guys somehow either predicted the future or I don't know how this happened, but before Marvel even had a TV show, you guys created a multiverse. You created a universe of, 7 shows, a couple of animated spin-offs, some specials. And did you know the industry was going to go that way? Did you guys come up with that? Like, how did you start thinking? She keeps pointing at you, so I'm going to ask you.
No, I mean, we just followed our passion for those stories. I mean, I would say I did a show at ABC before that called No Ordinary Family that didn't work. And out of that not working TV-wise, I learned a lot of tricks about, okay, how are we going to make something like The Flash every week when it came along? I mean, I don't know how many hundreds of visual effect shots I had to make it, but what had killed The Flash in its first time on CBS 30 years ago, was not making their air dates. And so that was always hovering over us. You know, can we do visual effects for television in a way that this character can come alive and the audience who just can't tell the difference between movies and doesn't care about the difference that you made something on a TV budget or this or that. They want it to feel and look like the movie they saw last week. And so there was a lot of pressure about that. And so we created systems and things that we came up with on the fly, you know, about how are we going to, we would start creating visual effects and previs off of outlines so that we could use all of that time by the time we shot and by the time I got to air. And it was just a lot of people moving all at the same time, all at once together, figuring out a lot of logistical things. All the crossovers that I knew from comic books would feel so special and extra. And we have two individuals who are on those shows too, who are directors and actors for us here today. And so, they were intense and nightmarish, and nobody wanted to do them every year, but everybody wanted to do them every year. But it was always in service to the fans also, I think, just really to the people that loved those stories as much as we did, to try and create something. And it was very passion driven. We didn't always have the money to do a lot of the things we did, but we had the ingenuity and the passion to do it.
First same-sex kiss, first same-sex marriage on Brothers and Sisters. Can we play the Supergirl clip? Can you think of a more relevant clip for today?
What'd you say?
I said, can you think of a more relevant clip for today?
I know. Yeah.
How did you get that on the air? Was that tough?
No, the CW is incredibly supportive of us. Of telling these kind of stories. That was not. I would say. Again, charting, going from Dawson's. Even in the time I went to Brothers and Sisters, I remember the first time we got to where the gay characters should kiss, and I said to the writers, let's. I don't want to quit my job today. I just let's just. And the executives called us and were like, "Why aren't the characters kissing in the scene?" And that much had changed. I think that the sad, and so we've seen a lot of growth. I would say it would be harder to get that storyline on now. I do think things have I think I'd be lying if I didn't say that I think things are people are a little bit more afraid and taking a step backwards. When $400 million gets spent so that during a campaign for people to hate a certain group of people, and to ridiculously fear a certain group of people, it does permeate. And so I think it's really important for individuals to know when their moment is to, I don't think as a showrunner or a director or that you have to imagine that you have to have some endless supply of courage every day to stand up and fight everything. But I do think it's important to be smart about when you want to deploy that and where is your line in the sand. And so that these stories continue to get told. And so if you were asking me, would it be harder now?
Yeah.
Yeah. But at that moment, it wasn't. And we were able to, everybody participated to take advantage of it. And that was another great example of, there were writers in the writer's room who wanted to tell that story. And so I got to help them cross the threshold.
I know a question on everyone's mind here that people have brought up to me is, throughout over 25 years now, you've continued to push the boundaries and making sure that the LGBTQ plus community gets represented on screen, behind the screen, in your company. How do we keep doing that now?
I think you have to, what's great is where I get most of my optimism and hope from is just, young people. When you talked about the 27-year-old Greg who did that stuff, I didn't have anything to lose. I knew what I believed. And so I look to them for the courage and the hope and the sense of, I'm not to say I don't want to continue to do my part to figure out where those stories still need to be told. And if I'm passionate about them, to tell them or to knock down barriers where I can. But I think it's like nothing brings me more joy or energy than when I'm working with young people. I think that they do see the world, thankfully, and many of them in a brighter way, and see all the things that I could see maybe when I was younger but can't see now in the same way. And so I think that it's about now when a writer walks in my office, they have very often the new perspective, and I can offer my experience about how I might do something, but their perspective is going to be the thing that changes, evolves something. And so I think that's where I would start. We'll
We'll jump back there, but let's go back for a second because you kind of came out of directing retirement to all of a sudden direct probably what is your most well-known feature film, a film called Love, Simon.
Right.
Which, again, was the first rom-com, YA LGBTQ plus love story ever told by a studio. What made you decide? You said there's like something in you, a certain fire, a certain passion that makes you go, I want to direct now.
Yeah, I read the script and I thought, oh, I'm supposed to do this. Yeah, it was that clear to me. I felt like my experience, my life experience, that there would be things along the way, even with that, marshaling that through a studio system that would take somebody who could say, no, I trust the audience here, and would be fearless about certain things, and also had a lived experience that was similar to the characters. I think I connected deeply with him, with the character of Simon. And so, yeah, and I'd always loved all the John Hughes movies growing up. I'd helped open the first video store in my town. And those were the movies I kept on the most. And very often when I'm working on a film or a show, I think about where it would be in that video store, what shelf I would put it on. And Love, Simon for me was the movie that wasn't on that shelf. And I felt like, I get to go back in time and put something on the shelf that wasn't there. And that was my North Star, making it and everything. I wanted to feel like those films felt. And, it was, I think once every decade, you kind of have a magical experience where everything just kind of comes together and every phase of it is great. If you go chasing that with every experience, I think you'll be disappointed, or at least that's been my experience. But inevitably I have one experience like that every decade or so, or 8 or 9 years, that everything just kind of congeals and feels very blessed. And that was one of them. We didn't have a title on that movie until I do have bad title karma. I do. I have bad title karma. It's like I'm very often in a situation where we're like, what are we going to call this? Green Arrow. I mean, was Green Arrow until they were like, you can't call it Green Arrow. And we were sitting there, we're like, well, what if we just call it Arrow? I mean, like it was, and so, and with Love, Simon, we had a title board of like, 1,000 titles. And at the last minute, we were like, well, what if he signs the last letter, Love, Simon, and we call it Love, Simon? That's how it came to be.
Wasn't it based on a book?
It was.
But does the book have a much longer title?
It does. Simon versus the Homo sapien agenda.
I'm curious because obviously you weren't the same director when you were shooting John Mahoney in multiple parts. How had watching all of these directors and running shows now for 15, 20 years, how would that change your outlook as a director? And kind of what was your process now in having to step from showrunner to director? Do you work from a spine? Did you still work from the script as a starting point? Or
we did. I would say my time in the edit bay has served me more than anything in terms of like, that's where I've now spent most of my time, more than writing, even more the number of hours. And so whether I'm working on the script or whether I'm on the stage or, on set, or I'm always sort of in the edit bay as well, thinking, well, I need this. I think I'll need that. I just know how many times I've had to solve something retroactively. So a lot of it is done in preparation. A lot of how I think about anything, even with running a show and breaking a story, is thought about what are we going to need there? Because I don't want to be there and have a problem. So that probably impacted it the most. But the other thing, the pact that I made with myself when I made that film, because the last studio film I had done before had been satisfying in some ways and unsatisfying in other ways creatively for me, I thought, oh, you know what? I really want to kind of throw away a lot of what I think I've learned. And I want to go back to finding even in shooting it, I want to go back to the Greg that shot Broken Hearts Club with no money and no time. And I wanted to have that same aliveness. And so that was kind of my mantra in terms of directorially. And I did a lot of things that, where once again, sort of like Broken Hearts Club, the DP had the camera on his shoulder and we were just with the kids and to, just capture the moment. And so I think I trusted, I trusted the circumstances a lot more, I think than I had before.
Was it one of those experiences where you shot list and you plan everything and then you get to the set and you throw it out and you just kind of create and work with the energy that's there?
For me, it's always both. I shot list down to the point where I literally put like a little time code, as Sarah knows, by the thing that like, I'd like to be here by 11:42. Like I do that. I'm that neurotic. But I do that so that then when I get there, I can be in the moment.
Do you usually get there by 11:42?
No, you don't. But I'm much more, at least everybody else around me is calm because they're like, well, this guy's overly prepared. So that kind of calms everybody else around me down. And again, I saw a director do it once. A director gave me a shot list like that on a show. And I was so impressed. I was like, oh, I'm going to do this, and you realize it's so much about, because it being human to like be confident every moment of every day. I think one of the wonderful things about directing is really being there in the moment and turning crises or problems into art. And that's where some of the real gems come from. And, when you are show running, that is something obviously that you can control everything but what happens on the day. And so, but so that's the flip of it, is that you can be, you're that close to the actor and it's all happening in real time. And you're feeling all those feelings that if you want the audience to feel or not, and so I kind of tried to go back to my roots a little bit, but also systematically, like keep in mind like the systems that I had created through the years, so that I felt safe to take a lot of risk.
I'm just curious. You've seen hundreds of television directors. Who's one that had a influence and change the way that you looked at directing?
Paris is definitely one for sure. In terms of also how he's lived his life and being a parent and a husband. And it was very inspiring to me to know that I could have, when I get those Christmas cards with your family, that I might one day have a family, and now I do. So I think that was also inspiring. But I'd say someone like David Nutter, who did a number of my pilots. When he did Arrow, I was coming off of, I had the Green Lantern before that. And he could tell I was really nervous about how Arrow was going to turn out. And he sat me down and he just said, Greg, I'm going to take care of you. I just think that, when I walked in, when he did the first pilot I did with him, he did Jack and Bobby, and I walked into his room I walked into his prep room and I felt like, oh, this is the pilot on all his walls with his pictures and his photos. And like, he sees this thing in his head. And I think that's also what was so intimidating for me about directing again. I think when you see these people that come through and can do it so well and just do it so intrinsically, you feel like, okay, well, that's not me. I'm not that person. And so, they've all, so many have had an impact through the years.
I want to show them a scene from Love, Simon. It involves a Ferris wheel. Did you know that this scene, was there any pressure on this scene that it was going to be iconic or kind of the moment that everyone would remember from the movie while you were shooting it?
No, I'm going to tell you a deeply personal story. My mother, and this night we shot this scene, my mom went into the hospital for the last time. So my mother was dying of cancer on the West Coast. And I knew before I went to direct the film that she didn't have much time left. And I almost didn't do the movie because of that. We were very close. Sorry.
That's okay. Take your time.
Anyway, so you said you'd do this to me. You said you'd make me cry at least once. Anyway, so I went and asked her permission to direct the film, knowing that she probably would never see it either. And she made me promise to send my son back to spend time with her, which I did. And I think she knew how important a movie like this would be to families like her. And so she was very supportive of me doing the movie. But she'd had on and off times during the last year that she was alive. And so, she, was sort of perking up right before I left and kind of doing a little bit better. And we set up the shot and, we set up the scene and I got a call that, Mom has to go to the hospital. And she actually couldn't get into this one hospital we wanted her to get into. So I called the hospital. So in between setups, I was calling the hospital to try and get my mom in. And we finally got her into this hospital. And so I shot this scene, and my husband's here. Myself and my kid, we left the next day. And I flew back and went to the hospital, and she was passed 10 days later. And so that was what was on my mind, truthfully. I had such a great crew, and I trusted the moment and the scene, and I had a shot list. We were done by exactly the time I wanted to be done by. And so when I experienced this movie, which I don't really. Some people go back and watch their stuff. I really haven't gone back and watched this film since. That's sort of what I think about.
First off, I'm so sorry.
That's all right. No, it was a beautiful thing. I mean, it was tough, but it's a beautiful thing. And I'm so glad I made this film. And in a way, it's a testament to her.
Are you okay with watching a scene from it?
Oh, of course. Yeah. It's easier than talking about it. So yeah.
That kiss got to last a little longer than the Dawson's Creek one.
Yes, it did. And there are two of them.
I am being told that I am reaching my 9:42 and that we need to have some Q&As from the audience.
Great.
What's the climate for funding and finding LGBTQ plus projects today?
I mean, it's always been, I've always experienced them as challenging to those stories to get made. I think in some ways there's more advocates. In some ways, to my point earlier, some things are tougher because people are more scared, but there's more outlets. I mean, do I think someone's racing to do, a gay rom-com for a major studio for wide release? I think that's going to be challenging, but that's all the more reason why people should be writing them. I mean, and wanting to make them so that they continue to get made, because you will find the advocates. You don't always. It's not always the people you think it's going to be, and it's not always on the timeline that you'd want it to be. But unless you imagine it first, and wish for it first, then no one else is going to. And so I think they're always unique. They're always tough, and you're always super, super grateful and proud retroactively. And that is what producing is: believing in something or someone or an idea or a story before anybody else. And then continuing to believe in it when every indicator would tell you that this is not possible. And then you get the satisfaction of knowing that you were there at those moments. Everybody can have faith when things are easy. But it's again, all the things that make it challenging are the things that make it rewarding.
And what show was that for you and Sarah, or feature? Which one took that long to get made, but you guys stuck through it?
I mean, so many. All of them.
All of them?
I mean, there's things we're working on 10 years now. I mean, it's we have a few that we're out with right now. Sarah brought us Red, White, and Royal Blue, which everybody I know, and that wasn't. Oh, and Jamie's about to direct exactly.
Is Jamie here?
Yep, she's directing the sequel for us.
Jamie Babbitt, everyone.
Jamie Babbitt,
one of our committee members,
who I met back in the day when we were both baby directors, and she did "But I'm a Cheerleader," and so that's a full circle moment.
Greg and I were at Outfest screening the same time. Broken Heart Club and But I'm a Cheerleader.
It's so exciting. Anyway, so I'm sure they probably all give you the same answers. They're really hard, but then you're so glad that they're the ones that people come up to you and say, bring up again and again, and that thank you for doing this and thank you for doing that. So
Sarah's going to tell me here, I'm going back to my thematic point, but do you see how much community and sticking with each other and growing with each other over the years and collaborating really does? That's how you get this work done. we're all about to go into another room soon, and there's beer and wine and food. So use this chance to get to know each other and to start building new connections.
Yeah, I'm so glad what you guys are doing. I think it's so resonant and important, and is like, yeah, it's where it's your graduating class.
Okay. And these are easy questions. In this current political climate, what are you most hopeful for? For you, for our directors, please, any advice?
I mean, resilience. I go back to that again and again, but it's so, I'm grateful for all the challenges I've had. And I'm not always grateful in the moment for them. That would be insane. But they become the next story or the next art or they become the bonding thing that makes you closer to somebody. And so it is I would answer the question by saying, like, the thing that makes the art hard is also in many ways, retroactively, the best thing about it. It's the richest parts are in the hard parts. And so, learn to just try your best in the moment, but if not in the moment, surround yourself with people or just a psychology or a mindset of enjoying those things, of trying to find the joy in that stuff, because you got to go through it either way. It's going to be hard no matter what. And so you might as well find a smile of some kind or some, or the gratitude of like, I'm getting to tell this story, or I'm getting to be the person who's going to believe in this story that's going to make it happen. And then I do think valuing other people's dreams is as important as valuing your own. I do think that pays huge dividends that people don't always see at the time, but like those individuals become the how you make it through.
What is it about material that makes you want to direct the project? And what is your favorite part of directing?
I think for me, it's usually the character. It's usually the lead character. Something about the lead character has some truthfulness or something about their life or what their experiences of the world that I feel deeply, deeply connected to. And I feel like I have to help get that out. I would say my favorite part of directing is the crew, is a dynamic with the crew. Because in my showrunning job, I don't get to interface in that way. I mean, there's many times I'll be at the wrap party of the series finale wrap party and be meeting crew members that I haven't met on a series because I've been in the edit bay or the writer's room or executives' offices or whatever. And, and they'll always say, I'm sorry to this or that. And I'm always apologetic to them that I don't know their name or I haven't worked directly with them. And so that's the fun part, because that's the part I don't get to do all the other times, is, getting to know all these individuals, and who have a similar work ethic, I think, or work in a similar way to like how I like to work, which is you're in the trenches with them. And I think that's been the most rewarding part of the relationships I make during shooting.
Do you feel like you create a certain tone or atmosphere on set?
I try to, whether it's a writer's room or on a set, to create. Yeah, I do feel responsible for it. Whether or not I succeed in doing it all the time, I don't know. But I do feel responsible and accountable to create an environment where people feel like they can do their best work, and to create an environment where people feel like they know that I don't think that I have to have the best idea all the time. That I need to create an environment where, the best idea can win, and people feel comfortable giving me those ideas and sharing those ideas with me, so that I can facilitate that story getting told. And so I think that's
Jamie, how's he doing? Paris.
Okay.
We got an excellent and a very great. That's good. That's good. Who would be 3 LGBTQ plus people you would like to see a biopic of? Well,
we've had a Rock Hudson one for a long time, and that's a story that I felt deeply connected to. We did we were able to do a documentary of it, but his story is just one I know deeply, and it's been hard to get it made, So I would add him. That's the first one that comes to mind. 2 others. I'd have to think. I don't know. We're working on an Abe Lincoln movie. Does that count?
Yeah.
And that's salacious. And so Berlanti calls Lincoln gay. Yeah. I mean, anyway, there was a wonderful documentary that, again, that dealt with that subject matter that we're also trying to get me into film. And there's just so many, there's still so many stories to tell. And so, I'd have to sit down and come up with my list, but I think that there's many.
Thank you for your generosity during COVID and the strike. This is from one of your first ADs on Arrow and Legends named Patricia. Where's Patricia?
Oh, hi. Nice to see you.
That was a good one. That was an easy one.
Do I have to answer?
And lastly, we can lead this into the last clip. Can we jump ahead a couple clips to show Fly Me to the Moon? What brought you to direct that project? You said the lead character, right?
Yeah, I would say with this one, it was also, I was a space nut as a kid. And I thought, I love rom-coms. I love space. No one is ever going to give me an opportunity to do both these things in one movie. And here Apple is. And I had flirted with doing another film with Scarlett Johansson. And she sent me the script and said, look, we had a director fall out, and would you be interested? And the timing just worked out in my life that I was available. And I'm not always available to go and do a film, because if we're starting a bunch of shows at the same time or something, I feel very accountable to those. And I wasn't. And I thought, oh, great, I'll have a whole new set of tools I haven't had before. And it felt like a throwback to the kind of films that I loved so much, again, in the 80s and 90s growing up, that it was a big movie for everyone, but about something. And so,
where did this fit on the shelf in the blockbuster?
I think those dramas that were, the dramas that were also deeply emotional and funny. And, I probably in the vein of the Sidney Pollacks and the Mike Nichols and those folks that could do a film that was, again, about something, but still had a lot of comedy and heart, but was still a big movie supported by a studio in that way. And I felt like the script that came in was very much a tribute to that, and a time in our history, where people across all parties and all groups were working together to achieve something impossible. And that really felt very like something that should be celebrated and recognized right now. And then I got the opportunity to shoot at Cape Kennedy for 2 weeks. And, there were all these wonderful things that just felt, like a chance of a lifetime.
So at its core, optimism and hope.
Definitely. This had a lot of that. Yeah.
I think you all will get a kick out of this clip. Let's play it.
Anyway, that goes to the point of directing is 90% casting and 10% not effing up the casting. So that's Jim Rash, obviously, and Scarlett as well. And Jim was a revelation in the part, but the secret weapon in that scene is that's my actual DP, the famous Dariusz Wolski it played the DP. And so in prep, they kept saying, you got to cast the DP to shoot the fake moon landing. And he was always walking around talking about how they would fake the moon landing, and what they'd have to do visually to do it. And finally, I just turned to him one day and said, I'd like you to play the role. And he was like, no. And so during the camera test, I just shot him saying a line, and I sent it to Apple, and Apple's like, he's great. He seems very real. And so he would be setting up a shot, and then he'd have to go get in the wardrobe and go to But I think it's about taking, again, it's like having fun and taking those risks, especially if you're doing a comedy. And most of the things I've done, really all the films I've directed had a comedic element, because that's always a lot of fun for me to spend time doing that stuff.
Did Jim improv any of that?
He did not. That was actually written, but I would say he did improv quite a bit in the film. And I do encourage, I mean, I always encourage a lot of improv. I mean, we tend to hire great actors from, be it UCB or wherever, that, and all the movies I've worked on that I think, and then I just once we get what we want, the first take or two, I really let them try and have fun with it.
Well, it's an amazing film for those of you who haven't seen it. It's on Apple. And I'm being told that it's now my 1042.
Okay.
So, Greg, take a look at the audience right now.
Yes.
When we asked who they most wanted to come speak today, we get one yearly event. You were far and away the number one choice.
Oh, that's very sweet. Thank you. Thanks very much. Yeah.
And do you know why?
I do not know why.
As we've just seen over the last 25, 27 years, you have created so much humanistic content that has touched people, that has included our community and its characters and its stories. And you've told us today it's a struggle, but you continue to fight that struggle and do it not just on the fringes, but in mainstream television and cinema, which can't be easy. And people right now, with the industry and where it's at, want some hope. And the empire you've built, all of the shows that you've created, or you and Sarah have had a hand in, give people hope. And in this time in our industry where things are very shaky and unclear, I think people look to you as someone who's weathered how many countless regimes, how many countless tech changes, et cetera, and continues with optimism, hope, and putting our community in front of the camera and behind it. And we just want to thank you for that.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Did you ever think I'd be saying this 25 years later?
No.
Is there anything you want to say?
I mean, just my immense, did my mic go out? Okay, there it is. No, but like this, what you guys are doing, the work that for the work that you're doing, that you're all coming together in this way, it takes community. I think for the people that came before me, that created a path for the opportunity that I've gotten to, and for the people that have stood by my side, some of who are here today, who have helped me do that. My husband as well. It's also, there he is. And Carl and Suzanne, so many people. And, just, I do have hope. I do. I know it's hard. There's a lot of times I'm scrolling and I don't have hope, but most of the time I do. And the key for me, again, is I go back to younger people. Like, cause every time I meet, you have to be around. We've got 2 kids, 9 and 6. It's hard to be around them and not have hope, anything but hope, because of just how they all see the world and the possibility in it. So, I'd like to, in the time that I get to participate in this business, continue to hopefully be a part of creating a business that, gives them, those individuals, opportunity, and people who haven't had that opportunity, because that's where I think the fresh news stories will come from.
Thank you, Greg.
Thank you.
What's that, Jamie?
Oh.
What is that?
It's our honorary.
Oh my God. Greg, do you know what that is?
Oh.
That was designed by Michael Susi.
Wow.
And it was our DGA cap. Love it.
Okay. Thank you.
You are now an official member of DGA.
I love it.